I'm Shaun Mastroianni. I'm running for state representative for the 43rd district. Do you want me to go into education? And,
yeah, if you just what do you think might be important for people to know?
I have a bachelor's from Eastern Connecticut State University in business, and I have a master's degree from University of New Haven. What's interesting is that that's the same. Both schools are the same as Kate Rotella, who I'm running against. And then as far as, I guess you would say my political experience would be planning and zoning in Stonington, blight citation hearing officer. I'm a Burgess in Stonington Borough, commissioner of buildings, and the chair of the Charter Revision Commission in Stonington Borough. And I work in senior living. Been working in senior living for over 10 years now.
How old are you, Shaun?
37.
So obviously one big issue that's been dominating the campaign, and something the state has to deal with, is the budgetary situation. Once again, the state's confronting a big fiscal deficit. If you were elected, one of the first things the legislature have to deal with is wait for the governor's suggestions on how to close a $4 to $4.5 billion shortfall over the 2 years, first 2-year budget you'd work on. So, how do you view that issue, and what thoughts or ideas might you bring to Hartford, on that issue if elected?
I think it's one of the most important issues that we have right now. It's why, I've spoken to the Minority Leader, Themis, that I'd like to be on the Appropriations Committee. I'd like to be very actively involved with the budgeting process. I think that we have about 42% of our budget comes from income tax. We need to look at that. We need to look at our third area where we get revenue from is business tax. So we really need to somehow get businesses into Connecticut that will help the economy, that hopefully can reduce the income tax, offset the income tax. Also bringing business into Connecticut will also spur the economy with, people. You need jobs, so people are going to move into Connecticut. People are going to stay in Connecticut if there's jobs present. So it's really balancing, not only balancing expenses, but balancing the revenue coming in.
Do you have any sort of overall philosophy of spending priorities where you think the state may spend too much, areas where it can afford to cut back or it needs to find savings?
I think that where we are with the state and with the budget, I think that everything needs to be looked at. Everything needs to be put on the table. We probably can't do it all at once, but we should focus on different areas, and we have to start somewhere and really drill down on where can we save money.
But at this point, there's not kind of any issue, any particular spending priority that you'd say, I'm going to go up there and really question that, or why we're spending in this area?
Some different ideas. There's the election grant program that we go through every 2 to 4 years. Typically, we spend about $40 million in a 4-year cycle. I think that needs to be looked at. I don't think we need to be spending that much or having the state government or taxpayers pay for our elections. I think that's something that we could start looking at. Other things that we could possibly look at, we have to look at transportation, and that brings up, the big topic about tolls. What do we do with tolls? Do we have tolls or do we not have tolls? I'm not in support of us having tolls. It'll cost us more money to have tolls in the state.
How so?
We had that bad accident in the early 1980s, and we signed a contract with the federal government that we would not put tolls back in place. If we put tolls back in place, we will have to give back most likely all of that funding that they have given us for our transportation. Last year, we received probably about $600 million in transportation. We would have to get that back. That's something that we would not have. Plus, we haven't even talked about how much is it going to cost to implement the tolls. I just don't think it's a good idea. I just think it's another tax, and it's another tax that will continually rise, just like the income tax has and other taxes that we have in the state.
What if the Trump administration and Congress said, hey, we want states to come up with ways of fixing their highways because we want to cut back on how much we're sending to states. So, all right, we'll make a deal with you. If you can figure out how to pay more for your own highways, we won't penalize you for putting up tolls. I mean, if that was off the table, if that penalty was off the table, which as we discussed as a possibility, it sounds like you'd still be against tolls. It sounds like you fundamentally don't like the idea.
I think that tolls will really tax more of the residents in the state. I just, I'd have to receive that information. I'd have to review that information.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't sit here and tell you absolutely, I'm completely against tolls if, those penalties were waived. We would have to look at the whole picture. From my perspective, I've always managed businesses. So I think for me, I have to look at the state as a business, and does it make business sense?
So where do we get the money to fix our highways? Right now we have a gas tax, but we have hybrid cars, we have electric cars. Cars are getting more efficient, which means arguably less money from that gas tax. So where do we get the money to fix our highways if not putting up tolls?
That would be something that, if I was elected and got in, that I would have to, really dive into the information that's available at the state to determine exactly, how could we balance that budget and get money so that we could improve our roads. But we have to look at other ways instead of just, increasing the revenue coming in. We have to look at, where are we overspending?
Mm-hmm. On the issue of spending, one of the big items that's eating up a large portion of the budget is the pension obligations. For decades, the state failed to properly put aside the money that would be necessary to meet its pension obligations as people retired, and now kind of the rubber's hit the road. The pension is grossly underfunded, and catching up with it is eating up more and more of the budget. How aggressive do you think the legislature should be in addressing that? Should maybe pensions that were promised be looked back, potentially rolled back because we're in a crisis situation? What are your thoughts going up there? How you deal with this big pension problem?
I think it's really difficult to take away something that was promised. I think that pension plans that people depended on that have already been promised and have financially planned accordingly for their retirement, I do think that they, should still receive those pensions. But going forward, there definitely needs to be something that changes. There are so many companies in Connecticut that don't offer pensions any longer. It's unheard of almost to have an actual pension plan. I think we have to look at going forward, but actually taking away somebody's pension or reducing it, I think that's something that we promised, and that's something that we have to try to figure out how to fulfill.
Mm-hmm. So be more aggressive in the rules going forward. And I know the state, in this last tier of workers, they started shifting newly hired to 401k system. So is that the kind of thing you're talking about, is getting away from
most businesses in Connecticut, offer a 401k versus a pension.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started out working at Aetna, they had pensions, and they sort of have phased out. And when I was there, I had a 401k instead of a pension.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that had been there 20, 30 years, still had their pension. They didn't take that away from them.
Mm-hmm. On tax and spending, what do you make of the standard bearer for your party, Bob Stefanowski? Says his goal will be a phase out over the next 8 to 10 years of the income tax. Is that a good goal? Is that a realistic goal? How do you view that?
I've been focusing on my campaign. I haven't really focused on his campaign. I haven't seen any of his plans and how he would do that. It's always, great to have, a plan. It's great to have a goal. I think it's a good goal, but I haven't seen enough to tell anybody whether that's achievable or not.
We haven't seen the plan either, so you're not the other one. Joe, you got some stuff here?
I do. Shaun, so you have a full-time job, which I'm sure is pretty demanding, judging by the title of it. You're pretty busy. You're on a board of Warden and Burgesses, where you're also one of the commissioners. You're on Planning and Zoning Commission, which meets 2 nights a month, sometimes more, and there's background work to do. You're the chairman of the Charter Commission, although their work is kind of wrapped up a little bit. I'm missing something. What was the other? Did I miss something? So you have a lot of responsibilities now. Can you handle the time demands of being a state rep in addition, or will you shed some of those other responsibilities? Or can you do it all?
I actually, so, announcing that I'm running all of the different committees every time we meet, it's like, so are you leaving us? Are you leaving us? And, Dave on Planning and Zoning, I've told Dave that my intention is not to leave Planning and Zoning. It's something I've been on for a while, something that I find very interesting and important to Stonington and the development of Stonington. The Beautification Committee, I think, is very important, and I plan on staying on it because it's one of the committees where you really can roll up your sleeves, get dirty, and really help out the community. So, my work, I could lessen my workload. Right now, I'm in Niantic overseeing an assisted living, and then I oversee another one in East Haven. Potentially, I could back off and only oversee the one in Niantic. But I wouldn't have taken on this task or challenge to run for state rep if I didn't think that I could do it. So I do plan on staying on the committees that I'm on. I do plan on, staying with the current employer that I have.
So you feel you can give the state rep job the time it deserves and do all these other,
Yes.
juggle the other responsibilities. Okay. All right. Something that looks like it's going to come up in the next session of the legislature is it looks like there's going to be an effort because it looks like there's a representative, if he's elected down this way, who's going to introduce a bill based on some reporting I've done in the last couple of weeks that is going to give the Attorney General and State's Attorney's Office the ability to launch some type of grand jury investigation into the Catholic Church, like they've done in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and New York. Would that be something you would favor? Would you be in favor of a bill like that would give the state an ability to do that type of investigation?
That's the first that I'm hearing of that. I would have to actually look at the details. I couldn't commit either way. You'll see that, if I do get elected in, I'm not going to be that person that's really shooting from the hip. I'm somebody that likes to really do my homework and really look into whether that's the best decision for everybody. So I don't know enough detail on that yet.
Okay. One of the other things we've been asking people is about marijuana. Do you favor legalizing recreational marijuana here in the state of Connecticut? Because it's probably going to come up.
So that's a really tough question because, you do have Massachusetts that is working on that. So we do have a neighboring state. That's something I think we need to look further into, like what does that look like? What are the effects of marijuana? Are there studies out there that prove, whether it's good or bad for somebody? I think that we need to do more research on that, and we need to look at the other states that currently have it legalized. And, a lot of people say like crime is going to be increased. Well, has crime increased? I haven't had time to do any of that research, but we'd have to really look into everything and put it out on the table and really determine, is this the best thing for the state or is it not the best thing for the state? I don't think it's the answer to increase the revenue line and balance the budget. I don't think, legalizing pot is going to overwhelmingly balance our budget and we'll be perfectly fine.
Okay.
But we really have to, we'd have to do our research.
Um, in some of our surrounding states and here in Connecticut, college affordability has become an issue. Do you have any thoughts about how to do that? How to make college more affordable? Anything the state could do to make college more affordable for students today?
College affordability. So I've lived that one. I have paid for my bachelor's and my master's by myself. I was not fortunate enough to have parents that had saved so that they could pay for part of my college or all of my college. It is very difficult in this time to leave college with that huge amount of school debt, which cannot be erased by bankruptcy, and you're expected to sort of start out your life. Where are you going to live? Are you going to be able to afford a house? Do you have a car to get to work? It's very difficult. I definitely think something needs to be done. I think that the cost of college is getting out of hand. I don't necessarily know what the answer is. I do know that there are some states that have programs that if you stay in the state, you get a job in the state, you stay in the state for, 4 or 5 years, they will pay off a portion of your college tuition. I think maybe possibly having an incentive program for students to stay in state could be beneficial as well. I stayed in the state and received, my education. Yeah.
One of the things neighboring Rhode Island has done is that on the community college level, they pay you the rest your bill after any financial aid you get. So that's CCRI, and CCRI is pretty inexpensive to begin with. But if your program's costing you $10,000 and you're getting $5,000, they cover the rest. Would that be something that you would be in favor of, at least on the community college level, allowing students to attend at no cost? Or at least offsetting.
I definitely think it's a great idea,
Yeah.
but again, we're trying to balance a budget, and we have to try to figure out where that money's going to come from.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with that program. If they have a commitment of whether you have to be working in the state for a certain number of years,
So. What I know about it, I don't think so. No.
but I think tying some other things to it to kind of
Okay.
keep people in Connecticut and promote jobs in Connecticut.
A lot of the questions say, I'd have to evaluate that, I'd have to take a look at it. You say a person who doesn't shoot from the hip, but wants to gather the information. But broadly speaking, what are sort of some of the fundamental political values that make you a Republican, that you see as sort of foundational for running as a Republican?
So interesting question. So I don't view people by party. I am part of the Republican Party, but I think that we need to treat government as though it is a business, and I think that Stonington's been a very good example. Parties have sort of been put aside with the current team of selectmen and selectwomen, and they've been able to accomplish so much by putting parties aside. I think that if we can really get past who's part of which party and really get down to how do we operate the government, how do we operate this business, I think that we can accomplish a lot more. When I decided that I was going to run for state rep, I decided many years ago and started building the foundation for that. I ended up choosing the Republican Party after speaking to a few Democrats because I ultimately really thought I was going to be running against Diana Urban. And I didn't really want to go through a primary. I think both parties have good values. Both parties have good people. I just think that we all need to come together. This is really not about party for me.
So how long have you been a registered Republican?
I have been a registered Republican probably for about 3 years, I would say, if I had to
And
guess.
before that, you were what?
Unaffiliated.
On jobs, any thoughts what Connecticut has to do to improved job growth. Now, we have some good news lately, electric boat expansion in this area, certainly, some of the other defense contracts in the state, but even given that, Connecticut has trailed behind our neighbors in recovering since the recession, job-wise. What thoughts may you bring to Hartford on that issue of job creation?
I think we need to look at how do we partner better with businesses. How do we, let's look at our current businesses that we have inside of the state. How can we partner with them to help them grow, to create jobs? Before we start bringing in other companies that may be competitors to them, we should really look at our companies, the major companies that we have in the state, and try to figure out how can we help you out? How can we make you grow? Do you want growth? We have to improve our business climate. I think right now we're lagging behind, and Massachusetts seems to really be taking a lot of our businesses from us. If you're a difficult state to do business in, why would you do business in our state? You have many other options. So we need to try to figure out how to market Connecticut and get businesses to move into Connecticut, and also to expand the current businesses we have.
One of the things that's been talked about for probably more than 2 decades, and it especially affects one of your towns, Stonington, and especially the Mystic part of town, is implementing a local hotel tax to offset the cost of the burden on the roads in Mystic, the police calls to the hotels at night, the traffic, investigating accidents on Route 12, all that kind of stuff that you have to pay for because the tourists are here. Obviously, they spend money here. But would you be in favor of a local hotel tax? Whether 1% or 2% that would go to the town, and if so, how would you work on the General Assembly level to get that passed?
Well, last I thought there was already a hotel state tax. I think that instead of creating a local tax, that we would have to look at that state tax and really see if what that money is being utilized for. Is that money really going back to assist the towns that have a higher tourism rate? Is that money really being used for tourism?
The answer is no.
I know what the answer is, and I think that a lot of times, there's a lot of areas within the budget and the revenue where we need to spend them. We need to look at the purpose of why this was created, and go back to maintaining that money where it needs to be. Tourism and transportation are probably the biggest, where that money, what was created, the processes that were created for that money to achieve, collecting that money, we need to give that money back to where the purpose was.
So you'd like to take a portion of that state hotel tax and use it either to promote tourism or to assist the local municipalities? Is that
Yes.
what you're saying? Okay.
You mentioned you thought, you expect you might be running against Diana Irvin when you thought about how you would go about it if you decided to join the Republican Party. Was there something about Diana Irvin's leadership or what she represented that motivated you to say people deserve to have a change? Or is it simply you want to be a state rep and she was the one in the way if you want to achieve that?
I think that Diana's a great person, but I do believe that there should be term limits. And I think somebody who's been in the same position for 18 years is 18 years too long. I don't have an answer for you of what that term limit should be, but I do think that there should be term limits. And I think that sometimes after serving for 18 years, you may take things for granted, or you may get lost in your purpose. I think she's done a great job, but I just think that it was time for change.
So even going up there elected, you'd be ready to put a limit on your own term. You're not sure.
I would.
You want to hear some arguments what that might reasonably be, but you think it's a good idea.
Yes.
You expressed an interest being on appropriations. So we have an expenditure committee and we have an appropriations committee, and there's been some, a budget committee, we have a spending committee, and then, a committee that has to raise the revenues. There's been argument it all should be one and the same, should be a ways and means, if you're gonna have spending money, you gotta figure out how you're gonna raise the money. And right now they're two different committees, so I was wondering, do you think that's, a good idea? It was recommended by a recent fiscal stability committee looking at that. Those committees should be together rather than separate.
I think that if they were together, you would be forced to balance a budget. Being separate probably makes it a little bit more difficult and takes up time to negotiate probably between the two committees. I don't see any reason why they couldn't be together. Coming from the business world and just going through our budgeting season at work, we don't really have like a group of people that are the revenue and the people that are the expenses. We're all in the same room coming up with an actual budget for revenue and for expenses. From a business perspective, it makes sense to join the two.
Politically, it's one less important committee if you're putting together one less important committee to put people on, and people like to get on important committees. So I know politically that's one of the reasons we have two different committees. Do you have anything else, Joe?
I got two more. One, seeing you're an unaffiliated voter until 3 years ago, and you've been a Republican now for 3 years. If you're elected to go up there, would you be willing to cross the aisle and vote with the Democrats once in a while if you felt strongly?
If I felt strongly,
or would you feel that you needed to vote with your new party, or would you be willing to vote against your party on issues?
Sometimes you may have to make that tough decision, and you may have to vote against your party. I'm here to represent Stonington and North Stonington. They really come first. And we have to look at it as a business. Like I said in the beginning of the interview, we kind of have to put parties aside and really look at what's the best interest for Connecticut.
The other question, and we asked your opponent this question, and I asked this to everybody I've ever interviewed for an election: why should the people of the 43rd district, when they go to the polls, choose you?
I think that Kate is a very good person. We have been friends for a number of years. I just think that, I've been thinking about this. I've been working towards this goal for over 3 years, sort of setting the foundation, being on different committees and being involved in town. I wasn't handpicked and said, I'd like you to follow my footsteps. This is something that, I have the drive for, that I wanted to do, something I have an interest in, and really want to give back. I think that everybody has to be, you have to be yourself. You have to be compassionate about what you do. You have to be willing to roll up your sleeves. I'm not necessarily somebody who is always out there, hey, me over here, take a photo of me, hey, I showed up to this marketing event. I'm usually somebody more behind the scenes, and it's not something that I'm looking to achieve because of status. It's something I'm looking to do to help out the state, something to do to give back to the people that live in the state.